The earth hung in the void, scarred and worn, a shadow of its former glory. Cities built on layers of rubble stood as a testament to humanity's will to survive. The skies above, once poisoned by industry, now gleamed with streaks of silver from orbiting stations, symbols of a fragile recovery. Within the crumbling headquarters of the Earth Defense Corps, EDC, Major Elena Hayes stood before a tactical display. Her eyes darted across reports detailing Earth standing in the galactic order, minimal resources, outdated technology, and a military force so small it was dismissed as ceremonial. She ran a hand through her cropped black hair, sighing. We've rebuilt our cities, healed our skies, but out here, we're barely a footnote, she muttered, gesturing at a holographic map of the galaxy. It pulsed with markers of civilizations far more advanced. Humanity's place was clear, at the bottom. Yet they persisted, not for power or prestige, but because extinction was unacceptable. The galaxy's fragile peace balanced on a knife's edge. The Galactic Concord, a coalition of powerful species, was all that kept the Krex Dominion's relentless expansion in check. For centuries, the Krex had perfected war, their armies as ruthless as their technology was superior. Reports from the Concord suggest the Krex are mobilizing, said a voice over the intercom. It was the gravelly tone of General Thassos, Earth's liaison to the conquered. Elena responded sharply. What else is new? They've been threatening that for decades. This time is different, Thassos replied. They're not posturing. They're preparing for total war, and the conquered is running out of time and soldiers. Major Hayes turned back to her team, her stern expression masking the turmoil inside. Born into a generation that had known hardship as its default state, she had learned early to survive with ingenuity. Earth doesn't have a choice. She addressed the room, her voice calm yet commanding. The Concord will pull us into this war whether we like it or not. But if we go in like this, we're dead before the first shot is fired. Her officers exchanged uneasy glances. Elena was right, and they all knew it. Earth's Defense Corps was a patchwork of outdated vessels and conscripted soldiers, barely fit to patrol their own atmosphere. Yet Elena wasn't one to back down. She had clawed her way to leadership, not by following rules, but by breaking them. We fight smart or we don't fight at all, she said, and I don't plan to lose. Across the room, Lieutenant Driss A.O. leaned against a terminal, arms crossed. The young man's sharp features were a mask of quiet skepticism. Elena, he said, his voice calm but tinged with doubt. You're assuming we have time to prepare. The Krex don't wait. She turned to face him. Got a better idea, Driss? Or are you here just to point out the obvious? Driss smirked. I'm here because you need someone who can think 3 moves ahead. Elena gave a faint nod. Though he had been reluctantly conscripted, Driss was one of the few minds on Earth capable of devising strategies that could rival alien brilliance. The two shared an uneasy alliance, born out of necessity rather than camaraderie. The Krex Dominion struck like a lightning storm, tearing through conquered defenses in mere days. Planets burned and fleets disintegrated under the might of their superweapons. Messages poured into Earth's command center. The Krex have pushed into the Thal system. Conquered fleets are retreating en masse. Elena felt a chill. The Thal system was a critical stronghold. If it fell, the Concord would be on the defensive for the first time in centuries. General Thassos's voice cut through the static. Major Hayes, prepare your forces. Earth is being drafted. Drafted? Elena's eyes narrowed. We're not even part of the Concord's command structure. Doesn't matter, Thassos replied. They need bodies and we're expendable enough to fit the bill. The mobilization was chaotic. Old war machines were dragged out of mothballs, their metal frames groaning as they were pressed back into service. Soldiers, many barely out of training, donned patched uniforms. Elena walked through the hangar, inspecting the ragtag fleet. This isn't an army, she muttered to Driss, who followed at her side. This is a funeral procession. Driss ran a hand over the rusted hull of a fighter. Funny thing about us humans, he said. We tend to do the impossible when no one expects us to. Elena's lips curved into a faint smile. Let's hope you're right, Lieutenant. The briefing room buzzed with low murmurs as Elena stood before her officers. We've been thrown into the fire, she began, her voice steady. But if the galaxy thinks we're just kindling, they're about to learn what it means to be human. The orders came abruptly, crackling over ancient comm channels in the EDC command center. Major Elena Hayes read the dispatch twice, her jaw tightening. Deployment was immediate. Destination, the edge of conquered controlled space. The hangar buzzed, with hurried activity. Soldiers scrambled to load supplies onto rusted carriers, the clanking of outdated equipment echoing through the cavernous space. The air was thick with unease, whispers of doom passing between young recruits. Lieutenant Driss Ayo stood by the main loading ramp, arms crossed as he surveyed the scene. These ships shouldn't even leave orbit, he muttered. Elena passed. Her tone clipped. They'll leave orbit because they have to. Complaints won't keep us alive, Lieutenant. As the fleet launched, Earth's ragtag convoy joined the Concorde's pristine, state-of-the-art armada. The contrast was glaring. Earth's patched vessels looked like relics from another era. Inside the command ship, morale was low. Soldiers spoke in hushed tones, eyes darting to the glowing tactical map that showed their destination. Why send us to the front? A young recruit whispered to a veteran. Because they don't care if we come back. The veteran replied grimly. Elena overheard, her expression hardening, her voice cut through the murmurs. We weren't sent here to survive. We were sent here to prove we can. The war zone was a scene of devastation. The remains of conquered ships floated aimlessly, torn apart by Krek's firepower. Clouds of debris drifted against the backdrop of distant stars, a chilling reminder of battles fought and lost. The EDC fleet entered the zone cautiously, scanners searching for Krek's signatures. Inside the command center, the tension was palpable. This place is a graveyard, Driss said, studying the displays. Abandoned by the conquered and ripe for Krek's ambushes. Elena's gaze remained fixed on the tactical map. Which means we're exactly where they want us. Reports from scouts painted a grim picture. Movement was detected in nearby sectors, but no Krek ships had been spotted. The silence was unnerving. In the mess hall, soldiers sat in uneasy silence, their meals untouched. One of them, a grizzled sergeant named Ava Patel, broke the quiet. Rule number 1 in a place like this, she said, her voice steady. Expect to die. Rule number 2, make sure they die first. Her words hung in the air, a grim mantra that summed up their reality. The first signs of Krek's activity came during a reconnaissance patrol. A faint signal flickered on their scanners. A hidden outpost nestled within the shattered remains of a moon. Elena studied the readings with a calculating eye. This could be our chance to strike a blow, she said. Driss frowned. Or walk straight into a trap. The team assembled cautiously, their nerves evident. Most of them were barely out of training, their hands trembling as they gripped their weapons. Listen up, Elena said, her voice firm. We're not here to die for the conquered. We're here to show them what humans can do. Stick to the plan and we might just pull this off. They approached the outpost under the cover of its own shadow, using the terrain to mask their presence. The Krek's defenses were formidable, but they underestimated the creativity of their opponents. As they infiltrated, the tension was suffocating. Every step felt like a gamble, every sound a potential alarm. But they moved with purpose, their fear tempered by Elena's unwavering resolve. Inside the Krek's outpost, the EDC soldiers worked with precision. Using tools scavenged from Earth's junkyards, they bypassed Krek's security systems designed to repel far more advanced attackers. Primitive tech, Driss whispered, a grin tugging at his lips. They didn't think to guard against it. They placed charges at critical points, avoiding direct confrontation wherever possible. But when the first alarm sounded, chaos erupted. The Kreks descended with mechanical efficiency, their advanced weapons cutting through cover like paper. Yet the humans fought back with ingenuity, using the terrain and their knowledge of the station to outmaneuver their foes. Sergeant Patel led a small team through a maintenance tunnel, flanking the Kreks with a surprise assault. They think we're weak, she growled. Let's show them how wrong they are. The final moments were a blur of explosions and shouted commands. The outpost crumbled under the EDC's assault, leaving nothing but fire and debris in their wake. As the team regrouped, battered but victorious, Elena held up a data core salvaged from the Krex systems. "This," she said, "is our ticket to proving we're more than cannon fodder." Back aboard the command ship, Elena wasted no time presenting the recovered data to the Concord's leadership. It detailed vulnerabilities in the Krex fleet, intelligence that could shift the tide of war. But the reception was far from what she expected. "Unverified data from an unproven force," scoffed Captain Vrel, a Concord officer whose disdain for humanity was palpable. "We can't risk our strategy on this." Elena's fists clenched at her sides. "We risked our lives to get this intel. Are you telling me it's worthless because we're not one of you?" Vrel's response was cold. "You were sent to occupy the Krex, not to rewrite our battle plans." The meeting ended with the data ignored and Earth's position as expendable cannon fodder reaffirmed. Driss found Elena in the war room, her jaw set in frustration. "They don't care," she said quietly. "They'll let us die before they admit we're worth listening to." Elena paced the cramped confines of her quarters, the weight of their situation pressing down on her. Driss sat at the desk, scanning the Krex data. "We can't rely on them," Elena said finally. "If we want to survive, we need to take matters into our own hands." Driss glanced up. "You realize that means defying orders? If this goes wrong, if we do nothing, we're dead anyway," she interrupted. "At least this way, we have a chance." The seeds of rebellion were sown. As the EDC began covertly planning their own operations, soldiers whispered of Elena's defiance, their loyalty shifting from the Concorde to their own leaders. As the ship moved deeper into Krex territory, the tension among the humans was laced with a new sense of purpose. They were no longer just surviving, they were preparing to fight back. The briefing room was silent as Major Elena Hayes scanned the map displayed before her. The holographic projection flickered, a reminder of Earth's outdated tech. A red marker highlighted their next target, a forward Krex position deep within hostile territory. "Another suicide mission," murmured Sergeant Ava Patel. The grizzled soldier leaned against the wall, her arms crossed. Elena kept her voice steady. "The Concord needs us to stall Krex forces here. No reinforcements, no backup. Just us." Driss Io glanced at the map, his sharp features shadowed with frustration. "They're using us as bait," he said. "We're a distraction so their fleets can regroup." "Maybe," Elena admitted. "But if we fail, the Krex push through, and it won't matter who survives." The mission began with Earth's forces moving cautiously through a desolate battlefield. Wreckage from previous skirmishes littered the ground, shattered ships, broken weapons, and the occasional glint of armor. As they neared their objective, the Krex attacked with brutal precision. Plasma bolts rained down, cutting through their cover. "Move! Now!" Elena shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. The soldiers scrambled, their outdated gear barely holding up against the assault. Patel led a flank to draw enemy fire, her voice calm despite the carnage. By the time they reached the extraction point, they had lost nearly a third of their forces. The survivors were battered, bloodied, and silent as they boarded the transport ships. Elena sat in the corner of the ship, her jaw tight. She could feel the weight of every lost life pressing down on her. Upon returning to base, Elena requested reinforcements for their next mission. The response came in the form of Captain Vrel, a Concord officer with a reputation for cold pragmatism. "You humans should be grateful you're even part of this alliance," Vrel sneered. His holographic image loomed over the room, his sharp features radiating disdain. "Your forces are barely adequate for reconnaissance, let alone combat." Elena's hands curled into fists. "We lost dozens of soldiers today, soldiers who fought with everything they had while the Concorde stood by and watched." Vrel's expression didn't waver. "Losses are expected. Your role is to occupy the Krex, nothing more." The conversation ended abruptly, leaving the Earth soldiers fuming. Driss found Elena in the war room, her shoulders tense with suppressed anger. "He's not just dismissing us," Driss said. He's counting on us to fail. The conquered doesn't see us as allies. They see us as pawns. Elena's voice was steel. Then we stopped playing their game. The tension among the soldiers was palpable, but it forged a camaraderie that surprised even Elena. Around the makeshift mess hall, stories of bravery circulated. Patel's flank maneuver, a rookie's quick thinking under fire. Patel sat beside Elena one evening, her tone uncharacteristically soft. You know why we keep going, don't you? It's not for the conquered. Elena glanced at her. Then why? For each other, Patel said simply. That's the only thing that matters out here. Meanwhile, Driss worked tirelessly to analyze captured Krex tech. His makeshift lab was cluttered with wires, tools, and datapads, a testament to humanity's ability to make do with what they had. This isn't just survival, Driss muttered to himself, his voice tinged with determination. This is proving we belong. Their growing unity was starkly contrasted by their increasing distrust of the Concord. Whispers of rebellion spread among the ranks, though none dared speak openly. Yet in the quiet moments between missions, there was a shared understanding. If they survived, it would be on their terms. They few. Intelligence came from a desperate Krex officer captured during their last mission. Elena stood in stunned silence as Driss translated the alien's guttural speech. The Starforge, Driss said, his voice low. A weapon that consumes entire systems. It's not just a fleet killer, it's a galaxy killer. The room was silent, the weight of the revelation settling over them like a shroud. If they deploy it, there's nothing the conquered can do to stop it, Elena said. We're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting for existence. Elena transmitted the intel to conquered leadership, only to be met with dismissal once again. A superweapon of that scale is implausible, Vrel said. You, humans, let your fear cloud your judgment. It's real, Elena snapped, and if we don't act, we're all dead. Vrel's image flickered out, leaving Elena staring at the empty space. She turned to Driss, her expression grim. We can't wait for them to believe us, she said. We'll have to stop it ourselves. Driss pored over the schematics of the Starforge, his brow furrowed in concentration. The weapon's AI was its backbone, but it had a vulnerability. It relied on predictive algorithms to anticipate enemy actions. What if we feed it something unpredictable? Driss suggested. Our tech is too primitive for it to recognize as a threat. It won't see us coming. Elena listened carefully, weighing the risks. The plan was audacious, bordering on suicidal, but it was their only chance. As preparations began, the soldiers worked with a focus that bordered on desperation. Patel led drills with unrelenting intensity, her voice cutting through the hangar like a blade. Driss tested and retested the jerry-rigged devices they would use to infiltrate the Starforge's systems. This has to work, he muttered under his breath. Elena addressed the troops before the mission, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. We're not just fighting for Earth, she said. We're fighting for everyone who thought we couldn't, for everyone who doubted us, and for the billions of lives that depend on us succeeding. The night before the mission, the soldiers gathered in the hangar. Some shared stories, others quietly polished their weapons. The atmosphere was heavy but not hopeless. Elena sat with Patel and Driss, their conversation subdued but meaningful. We've come a long way from Earth, Patel said, her tone thoughtful. Funny how the worst situations bring out the best in people. Driss nodded. We've got one shot at this, no backup, no second chances. Elena looked at her team, pride swelling in her chest. Then we make it count. As the ship prepared to launch, the soldiers boarded with quiet determination. The Starforge loomed in their future, a dark shadow against the stars. In her quarters, Elena reviewed the mission plan one last time. Her mind raced with possibilities, contingencies, and the weight of the lives depending on her. As the engines roared to life, she whispered a single promise. We will not fail. The Starforge loomed in the void, its immense structure pulsing with the cold light of artificial power. It wasn't just a weapon, It was a monument to the Krex's belief in their invincibility. The EDC ship glided toward it, silent and unassuming. Driss sat at the controls, his fingers darting over the interface. "They've got sensor nets tighter than a vice," he said, his voice low. "One wrong move and we're vapor." Elena stood behind him, her eyes locked on the holographic map of the station's defenses. "Stick to the plan. Trust your instincts," she said, though her own nerves were tightly wound. Patel chimed in from the rear. "Instincts? Great. We're dead." The dry humor drew a faint chuckle from the crew, breaking the tension just enough. The ship slipped past patrol drones using outdated systems that the Krex wouldn't bother scanning. Their underestimation of humanity was the EDC's greatest asset. As they reached the station's docking bay, the crew moved with practiced precision. Patel led the charge, her voice steady despite the oppressive silence. "Keep it tight. No heroics until I say." Inside, the Star Forge was a labyrinth of cold steel and glowing conduits. The air was unnervingly sterile, the hum of power almost alive. Close calls came quickly. A patrol drone veered dangerously close to the team, its sensors scanning for anomalies. Driss disabled it with a burst of electromagnetic interference. "Primitive tech," he muttered. "Still effective." They pressed on, each step taking them closer to the core. The central control chamber was massive, its walls lined with screens displaying streams of alien code. In the center stood the AI core, a shimmering column of light encased in a protective barrier. Driss set to work immediately, his tools crude but effective. "This thing's running predictive algorithms light years ahead of anything we've seen," he said, his voice tinged with awe. "But that's its weakness. It can't account for chaos." He typed rapidly, feeding the AI a series of contradictory instructions. The lights in the chamber flickered and the station shuddered. "It's working," Driss said, "but it's going to notice soon." Patel's voice cut through. "We've got company." Krex reinforcements poured into the chamber, their mechanical precision turning the room into a battlefield. Elena led the defense, her rifle barking as she coordinated the team's movements. "Hold the line," she shouted, her voice carrying over the cacophony. Driss continued his work, sweat dripping from his brow. "Almost there. Just a little more." The AI core began to falter, its light dimming as the paradox unraveled its systems. But the Krex were relentless, their forces pressing the humans to their limits. A plasma bolt struck near Patel's position, sending her sprawling. She gritted her teeth and pulled herself up, firing back with unrelenting determination. "Elena," she called, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We're not all making it out of this." Elena's heart clenched, but she didn't falter. "That's an order, Patel. No heroics." Patel ignored her. She grabbed a pack of explosives, her gaze locking with Elena's for a brief, silent moment of understanding. "Cover me," Patel said simply, and then she was gone, charging into the fray with a ferocity that stunned even the Krex. She reached a choke point and detonated the charges, collapsing the passage and buying the team precious time. The explosion rocked the chamber, silencing the Krex reinforcements but leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Elena's chest tightened as she stared at the collapsed corridor. "Patel," she whispered, but there was no time to grieve. Driss looked up from his console, his voice urgent. "The AI's destabilized. We need to move. Now." The team raced through the station as alarms blared, the Star Forge beginning to tear itself apart. Driss's paradox had triggered a catastrophic chain reaction, and the structure groaned under the strain. "Evac point is 2 levels down," Elena shouted, guiding the team through collapsing corridors. Explosions echoed behind them, each one a reminder of how close they were to destruction. They reached the docking bay just as the station began to implode. The team barely made it onto their ship, and Driss punched the engines without hesitation. From the viewport, they watched as the Star Forge crumbled, its immense power finally consuming itself. The Krex fleet, caught in the blast radius, was decimated. Inside the ship, the survivors sat in stunned silence. The price of their victory hung heavy in the air. Elena leaned back, her voice a whisper. We did it. Driss nodded, though his expression was grim. But at what cost? Back aboard the Concorde command ship, Elena confronted Captain Vrel, her fury barely contained. We destroyed the Starforge, she said, her voice sharp. But you knew we wouldn't have backup. You wanted us to fail. Vrel's expression was unreadable. Your forces were never meant to succeed, Major. You were meant to distract the Krex while the Concorde regrouped. The words hit Elena like a blow. You used us as bait, she said, her voice trembling with rage. You were willing to sacrifice us, sacrifice billions, for your strategy. Vrel's gaze hardened. And yet you succeeded. Perhaps humanity is more resourceful than we gave you credit for. Elena stepped closer, her voice low and dangerous. This isn't over. Humanity isn't just a pawn in your games. We earned our place in this galaxy, and we're not going to let you forget it. Vrel said nothing as she turned and left, but the tension in the room was palpable. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted, and humanity was no longer content to be underestimated. The Krex fleet hung motionless in the void, their once imposing presence reduced to scattered remnants. The destruction of the Starforge had left them disoriented, their unshakable confidence shattered. The ceasefire came not as a formal declaration, but as a desperate signal, a transmission laced with static, the Krex acknowledging their inability to continue the fight. In the Concorde's High Council chambers, murmurs of disbelief rippled through the assembly. A victory against the Krex was unprecedented, and the humans were at the center of it. They destroyed the Starforge, one ambassador said, her voice tinged with awe. With no reinforcements, no support. Captain Vrel's face twisted, in barely concealed disdain. A fluke. Their methods were reckless, it was luck, nothing more. But the narrative was no longer under Concorde control. Stories of Earth's defiance spread like wildfire across the galaxy. For the first time, humanity was no longer seen as a relic of a bygone era, but as a force capable of reshaping the galactic order. In the aftermath, the Concorde begrudgingly acknowledged Earth's contributions, though their praise was hollow. To the humans, it didn't matter. They had proved themselves, and they knew the galaxy was watching. On the deck of the EDC command ship, Elena Hayes stood alone, staring out at the stars. They looked the same as they always had, but everything else had changed. Her thoughts drifted to Patel's sacrifice, the faces of the soldiers they had lost, and the weight of the decisions she had made. Driss joined her, his steps hesitant. Thinking about Patel? He asked softly. Elena nodded. Her. All of them. Every order I gave, every risk I took, it cost us more than I ever wanted to pay. You made the only choices you could, Driss said. Without you, we wouldn't have made it this far. Elena sighed, her shoulders heavy. We survived. But survival isn't enough anymore. We have to make sure this never happens again, not to us, not to anyone. Driss nodded. Then we build something better. Something that doesn't rely on the Concorde scraps. For the first time in days, Elena allowed herself a small smile. You always did like impossible projects. In a converted hangar on Earth, Driss worked tirelessly alongside a team of engineers and scientists. The schematics spread before him were a blend of human ingenuity and reverse-engineered Krex technology. We can't just patch old systems anymore, Driss said, addressing the team. We need something new, something that matches what's out there and surpasses it. His vision was ambitious, an independent Earth Defense Corps, capable of standing on its own in the face of any threat. The room buzzed with determination, fueled by the memory of their hard-fought victory. Elsewhere, whispers began to circulate among other Concorde-aligned civilizations. Smaller, disenfranchised worlds saw Earth's defiance as a beacon of hope, their admiration quietly growing into potential alliances. The galaxy's fragile peace returned, but it was tenuous at best. The Krex, though weakened, remained a threat. The Concorde, fractured by mistrust and political infighting, struggled to maintain unity. For humanity, the war had marked a turning point. No longer dismissed as a footnote, they had carved out a place in the galactic order. one they intended to keep. On a distant colony, a group of alien diplomats debated Earth's unexpected rise. "They are dangerous," one said, their voice heavy with caution. "Dangerous, yes," another replied. "But also inspiring. Perhaps we underestimated them." Back on Earth, Elena stood before a gathering of soldiers, her voice steady and clear. "We've proven what we're capable of," she said. "But this is just the beginning. The galaxy is watching, and we won't stop until humanity's place among the stars is undeniable." The room erupted in cheers, the sound echoing into the night. Humanity's journey was far from over, and the stars held challenges yet to come. The air on Earth was crisp, the kind of chill that cut through even the thickest uniforms. Major Elena Hayes stood before the newly erected memorial, a towering structure etched with the names of those who had given everything. The sunlight glinted off the polished stone, each name a stark reminder of the price of survival. Elena's fingers brushed against Ava Patel's name, her thoughts heavy with guilt and gratitude. Patel's laughter echoed in her mind, her unwavering resolve in their darkest moments a source of strength. She always said dying wasn't the worst thing. Elena murmured to herself. Not trying was. Behind her, soldiers gathered in silent reflection, their faces a mixture of pride and sorrow. Some stood in clusters, whispering stories of those they'd lost, while others remained alone, the weight of their memories too, heavy to share. Driss approached, his expression softer than usual. "She'd hate this," he said, gesturing at the solemn scene. Elena glanced at him, her lips twitching into a faint smile. "She'd say we're wasting time. There's still work to do." Driss nodded, and she'd be right. The wind stirred, carrying with it a sense of resolve. This was a moment to honor the past, but it wasn't the end. In the depths of an EDC research lab, Driss stood before a holographic display, his brow furrowed. The artifact was unlike anything he'd encountered, a crystalline structure pulsating, with faint energy, its origin unknown. "We found it on the edges of Krex territory," one of the researchers explained. "It doesn't match their tech. In fact, it doesn't match anything in our database." Driss leaned closer, his mind racing. The artifact's design was almost organic, its intricate patterns seeming to shift under his gaze. "Whatever this is, it predates the Krex. It's ancient and powerful." Elena entered the lab, her presence commanding immediate attention. "What are we looking at?" Driss turned to her, his voice laced with awe. "A game changer. If we can unlock its secrets, it could rewrite everything we know about the galaxy." Elena studied the artifact, a flicker of unease crossing her features. "And if it falls into the wrong hands?" Driss hesitated. "Then it could destroy us all." The implications were clear. This discovery was both a promise and a threat, its potential as vast as the unknown from which it came. The EDC training grounds buzzed with activity. Soldiers drilled tirelessly, their movements precise, their determination palpable. The lessons of the war had been hard-earned, and no one was willing to let their guard down. Elena stood on an overlook watching the scene unfold. Her voice was steady as she spoke to Driss. "Whatever's out there, we'll be ready for it." Before he could respond, an encrypted transmission came through, the source unmistakably Krex. The message was brief but chilling. "They are coming. You are not prepared." Driss's face darkened. "The Krex don't bluff." Elena's gaze hardened. "Then we'll make sure they're wrong." As the transmission ended, she turned back to the training grounds. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Humanity would face whatever came next with the same resilience that had carried them this far.